If we were a guild, what would we put on our logo?
We're great geeks.
An SDI socket, Sky.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to Office
Check 1, 2.
Hours.
Check 1, 2,
if
3.
you are watching on YouTube and you see that link below, you can actually join the. I got a timeout from Sky. Was that on purpose? You're gonna have to talk.
Victor was checking his mic in the middle of your opening.
Oh,
so
I hold on. Let's see here. I guess I'm just really quiet. I did not hear that. So we're just going to go ahead and keep starting. Welcome to Office Hours. And if you are, if you're here as an attendee and you're trying to figure out how all these people became panelists, they showed up early. They thought they had something to contribute to the conversation. So if you think you have something to contribute, definitely make sure to raise your digital hand before 6:40, and we'll bring you in, have you be part of the panel. We open at 6. We talk about all kinds of things. And somehow we were talking about cows this morning. So I can't promise that it's going to be techie, but it's generally entertaining. So we moved from cows to union issues to Apple all in 40 minutes. So it was a wide ranging conversation. But that's what you see at 6 o'clock in the morning. We're all just getting started. 6:40, between 6:40 and 6:43, we start the mic checks. As soon as we start those mic checks, we're done. This is as big as the panel's going to get. And then at 7 o'clock to 8 o'clock, it's really your show. As the viewer, you're the producer. You're the one that actually is driving the show with your questions and voting on questions. And so if you're in Makana, if you're in Zoom and trying to figure out what Makana is, there's links to it in the chat. If you're in Makana, ask questions, vote on those questions. How long we spend on them, which ones come first, all those things depend on you and what you post into the chat room. So definitely, it's not like we kind of use the chat; we depend on it. So it's your job as the attendee to handle that. And then second hour, we talk about something specific. So Mondays are kind of a wild card. Tuesdays are audio. Wednesdays are video. Thursdays are a special guest. And on Fridays we talk about event production in general. And then Saturday we talk about education. And then Sunday it's kind of a wide open conversation. So anyway, so if you want to share this, you want to use this link here. I'm going to post the link here in Makana. If you want to share something here, let me see here. Use that link. If you use your own link, you will not. It will be problematic. You'll come in as many people will come in as you. So anyway, that's the link to share if you want to bring other people into this, and we want more people like you to join. So, Bill, can we go ahead and jump into the questions?
Sure, absolutely. Jeffrey Reyes of the Bronx Borough in New York.
Can't hear you, Bill. Hold on, is that me or you?
Can't hear me? It looks like. Does everybody else hear me? Anybody?
I can hear you.
We might be going through a little storm because I'm getting choppy video from everyone.
Okay, but Alex can't run things unless he
Bill,
can
I
hear
think
me.
you should move forward.
No, there's something wrong with my earpiece this morning. I moved from home to my office, and my system here is not quite finished. So anyway, I can hear you now.
You can hear me now?
Ahead,
Okay,
Bill.
great. So Jeffrey Reyes of the Bronx Borough, New York, wants to know from Alex, is there an XLR to USB-C adapter that you recommend? He'd like to use his DPA mic for Zoom calls when traveling.
Anyone have any specific? I mean, the only one that I have is a MixPre. So that's a lot of interface. But you can. There's lots of XLR to USB, and then you just need a USB to USB-C cable. So go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if your DPA mic has a microdot connector on it, since you're in the DPA family, DPA sells a fairly expensive interface that is very. He mentioned Jeffrey mentioned the traveling. It's like the size of a coaster, and it works for mobile devices and also Macs and PCs. But it's fairly expensive for what it is. Focusrite also has, I think they call it the eye tracker line, but they have a line that works with iOS devices and also computers, and also another brand that Jeffrey Powers recommends a lot is IK Multimedia. They have a good selection of interfaces.
Jason and then John, then we'll move on.
Yeah, I think it's called the iRig, if memory serves. It's what you're talking about, Mickey. And I would say on a budget, the Zoom H6 is pretty good. It may require an adapter, but I think it's a pretty solid choice. Maybe $300, something like that.
Go ahead, John Middleton.
We've been real successful with the Shure MOTIV digital audio interface. It's the MVI-A. It's a little heavy, but that's why we like it, because you could mute the mic and it has a headphone adjustment and it has some EQ.
That's great. Next question.
Tim Corbin out of Baltimore says, let's talk presidential town halls from last night. Specifically, the Trump town hall audio sounded awful, and the Biden town hall lighting and LED wall was pretty harsh. What would you do to improve each of those things in those environments?
So I only looked at it in the 20 minutes when you guys were doing mic checks. I didn't actually watch them last night. I'm kind of saturated. But the I think that scanning through it, the big bummer is that we have this opportunity to not have a lot of people in the room and not have to have amplification. But anytime you open up amplification in the room, you've kind of ruined the audio for everybody watching. so I mean, it's I don't think, unless you're wearing a headset and unless you really have soft amplification, I just view all stage events with open speakers to be kind of the audio will never be good. It'll always be mediocre to poor. So they have open speakers. So once you do that, it's not going to turn out well. And so that's you can filter some of it out, but I think that you're just kind of giving up once you turn the speakers on. As someone who's done streaming for a long time, it sounds fine in the room, but anytime you listen to a clean feed from a stage, you know that it's not going to be great. And so I think that that's the challenge that they both had to some degree. I think one of the problems with some of them are eye lines. They have people coming in from online, and the monitors were obviously not anywhere near where the cameras were. And so I think that people need to really think about eye lines in production. If someone's coming in over a video camera, that monitor should be underneath that video camera so that it looks like they're looking at them, not like they're looking like this the whole time and off to some angle. So I think that was my biggest complaint about the cameras. I thought the LED walls weren't as bad for Biden in the 2 minutes that I kind of looked at it. They were a lot further away from their background, so they weren't as harsh. I do like the fact that they didn't do step and repeat. Step and repeat is just evil. It's a that's not even a vestige from the past. That's a vestige from the last century. It's just such a horrible idea, and so mostly what we've seen in most of these debates are step and repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat, step and repeat everywhere. Step and repeat, by the way, is a common term for having a whole bunch of little logos behind people that in a TV environment not really necessary. We have things called Chiron or graphics or whatever. We can put those up. We don't have to put them behind them at every moment. And they're just an embarrassment at this point. They're saying, I am old in production. Like not old, but like old thinking. Like old thinking in production if I'm going to put a step and repeat anywhere. And so anyway, so they didn't do that, which I thought was good. Shooting outdoors is kind of always a mess. So the Trump one looked like they were shooting outdoors, and that's never going to work out well, ever. So again, I view everything from a lens of there's how many people watching online versus how many people in the room. And if there's a lot of people watching online, the only thing you should be tuned to is how to make sure that they have a great experience. Like it doesn't, like we serve, that's the consumer, that's the, like who cares about the people? I'm sorry, but like people in the room are not important to that, and we have Zoom, we have all these other things we could have had. There was no reason to put anybody in the room for any of those, like to do it. It's producers who just don't know any other way to do it. So it's just showing you that they're not there yet. So we still are dependent on that thing. I think putting a bunch of people on Zoom makes sense to get the reaction. I couldn't do this show. I couldn't do the show without the panel, just seeing the panel, seeing reactions, making decisions about that. So I understand that you need to see people. I just don't think they have to be physically there anymore. Go ahead, Bill.
Well, I think Step and Repeat originally grew up from like the red carpet things at the Academy Awards and stuff like that, where you had a scrum of photographers. So there's a
Yeah.
big wide array of people. They're shooting from all different angles. And the
No, I get
brand
it.
people said, you've got to have the brand in every shot. But I agree with you 100%.
It's when you control it. I get the red carpet. I get why they do it in the red carpet. It's still abomination. Like it's just garish. It says I have no taste. like it just scream. It doesn't say it. It screams I have no taste. And so I want to garishly make sure that my logo is everywhere. Like it has to be everywhere. I have to get my 10 cents out of this. And so if you're a brand, it just says that either you're talking to someone who has no taste or you have no taste when you put it anywhere near a Step and Repeat, in my opinion. And then when you're controlling the cameras, when it's actually your show and you put Step and Repeat behind it, you're like, what are you doing? Like you could just control that. Anyway, there it is. Their guy is showing a example of a big poster for no taste. Anyway.
Amen.
So anyway, all right. Next question.
Doug Ferguson from the panel in Fort Wayne says, does anyone use the cross posting on Facebook and can share the experience with the audience interaction?
Cross posting, I'm assuming what you're talking about is you have a live event or you have an event, something you're doing there, and you basically link, instead of streaming to multiple Facebook events yourself with your streaming apparatus, you cross link them so that live event appears on 20 different Facebook events. I think that's what he's referring to. And we use it a lot. It's a lot more efficient than than streaming to all of them. And we used to stream to all of them, which was a thing. You know, stream to 6 or 8 of them at a time. Go ahead, Jason.
I've used the Restream chat aggregator, and I find it's pretty effective. The lag is neat because it's actually calculated in the round trip. It'll show you how long it takes for every cross posting to happen. And in my experience, it's 2 or 3 seconds tops, and that's for a dozen or so at a time.
Mm-hmm. Well, George, and then Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
Jason just kind of touched on it. I mean, I like the cross posting, but Restream right now, it allows you to get your chats, even going to LinkedIn also. So that's a pretty good, the Facebook feature is fine, but if you really want to take advantage of it, definitely Restream is giving you that chat experience across all the platforms that you stream into.
Go Jeffrey, and then Stuart.
The real advantage of it's called the watch parties is it then goes into
the watch party is different. A watch party is different than cross linking. Yeah, I mean,
but you can cross link, and it's also my point being because my band uses it when we do at home shows, is each person will then relink it on their pages, which will then create a different container, which their friends and family can then comment on. And the interesting thing about that is they'll see their friends and family, but then the main page will see everybody. So it'll have a different target audience in the end when you do it that way. So if you have a large group, having everybody go into their own and put it on their page, they'll get the comments from their friends and family, and then the main thing will see the whole thing.
Good. Stuart, and then Doug. You're in perfect sync.
Okay, so I have to take this shot for missing the sync. Okay, has anyone noticed an issue with Restream where if you've got a event scheduled in YouTube or Facebook and you start your go to test, it automatically starts the stream instead of keeping it private? We've run across this a couple of times with Full Course Yellow, where it just started straight off the bat rather than waiting for the scheduled time to begin.
I've had that problem with Restream specifically, that it just starts the event. It restarts old events that it was connected to before. If you turn it on, it'll just turn it back on in a way that I didn't even think was possible. I didn't YouTube. It'll be 2 days later, I turn on Restream and that old event is still running. It just turns it back on again. I didn't even know it's got some magic claw into YouTube that it can reopen a closed event and start streaming to it. It's a little. Restream makes me. I have to admit I have to use it for some clients, so I'm very familiar with it. I do not like it at all. I won't use it on my own events. It makes me very uncomfortable because of the way the API interacts with the social network. I feel like I'm losing control of what I'm doing, and I won't use it on my own stuff. But if a client asks me to use it, I use it a couple times a week. So it's not like I don't use it, but I have enough experience now to go, oh, this is just, there's so many. And one of my other big complaints is that Restream will not display captions. So, and the reason that's important is that I want to know whether I'm getting captions at Restream before they get sent out to everywhere else. So I can't turn it on and know that it's, it's not passing. It doesn't pass enough data. Like you really should, it should be showing us more data before it goes to the stream. But it's consumer, it's a consumer solution, but it's a little frightening to me. Go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, the event we're doing, one of the presenters is this couple that does wine and music. They already have a Facebook following, so they have like 4,000 to 5,000 followers. So they asked us, like, we're going to do it to our client's page, but if crosstalk or cross posting was the best, to send it to theirs as well. So that's more.
I would attempt to do it the other direction, but yeah, I would cross post if they have the big following. I would cross post from them to the client's page, as opposed to the client to their page. But that's they'll get more viewers, but it's better for the client to push it. Oh, if they're connected to it, then streaming straight to the client makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, I would do cross posting. I wouldn't stream directly to both of them. I would just cross post it because it will. It's better from an aggregate. Your statistics will be easier to manage inside of a cross post than it will be if you stream them separately. Go ahead, Jason.
I've had that issue exactly once, and what fixed it immediately was just burning that YouTube event and then fix it and just re-adding it, and somehow it fixed.
But if you're scheduling the event, you want it to go off at a certain time. You don't want it to go firing off on its own.
Oh, believe me, I understand.
Yeah. So that's
exactly how it happened.
I mean, that's a lot of times the way to really solve that in Restream is to set it up as an RTMP out. So when I do it and I don't have a client that's requesting a direct connection, I have Restream just do a dumb RTMP out. Like I don't need you to think about this. I don't want you to know anything about it. I just want you to do RTMP, and then it's just sending bits that direction. It doesn't have any interaction with the platform. And Stuart, it will solve that problem. I don't think it'll start it on then it's on YouTube side if it thumps it. But it shouldn't do it at that point. Go ahead, Sky, and then Jason.
Well, we are doing a live Zoom cooking experience this Saturday. So it's
what time again?
5
This is
p.m.
Madeline?
Yes, it is. And she is joining with a woman in Denver. And so it's going to be theoretically on YouTube and Facebook, but we'll see if I put my face to the fire hose, how much I can take in.
And it's 6 p.m. you said?
5 p.m. our time, West Coast.
Our time. Okay, 5 p.m. our time. Okay, great.
So,
I'm gonna try to tune in and see how it looks. Jason?
Oh God. It's like having your mom show up. Thanks.
One more thought about that. If you're going to aggregate chat, you can always use Restream to aggregate the chat, with their chat overlay feature. Use it for the aggregate and then RTMP out and then just overlay it with another machine. That's a thought.
Sorry.
Yeah.
But my question was
right.
I'm going to be using I'm going to be using StreamYard. I mean, that's my plan because it's the simplest at this point because I don't have my vMix configured. And I'll probably be reaching out.
I don't have any experience with I mean, I opened it up and played with it a little bit, but I haven't done StreamYard in any deep ways. I just don't know. I mean, I know of it, and I've played with it. Jeffrey Powers is going to fly out and help. Excellent, Jeffrey.
Yeah,
real quick.
Yeah, I'm going to try and do that. Really quick, if you're just going to, and the way I'm reading this, you're going just to Facebook, not to Facebook and YouTube. Putting in something like Stream is
Facebook and YouTube.
Both. Oh, okay. In that case, then Restream. If you're just going straight to Facebook, then take Restream out of because that's just an extra problem waiting to happen. But if you're going to be going to more than one service, then Restream would be perfect for that.
Next question.
Well, it's actually kind of, I think, a little bit of a follow-up add-on. Doug Ferguson's also back with destination is Facebook and YouTube simulcast. Inputs come from a musician, an artist, and a singer. So at the most 3 sources at the same time, which platform would have the best quality to get the content into his ecosystem?
So Doug, they're in different places?
Yeah, so the event is an hour long. The first half of it is this couple that I just mentioned. And they do their wine and song deal or music deal. and then they turn it over to an artist who kind of paints an upside down picture with music
Yep.
and things, and then reveals it. And there's also going to be a signer the entire time for so
ASL.
I'll have her in a box, but at any one time there could be 3 people coming in, and just wanted to know
Where are you based? Are you based in it with any one of them?
no, one's in California, I think one's somewhere else in New York, and then
Do they talk to each other?
there might be one time where they do, yeah.
So I mean, the big thing is that if they're talking to each other, you need low latency. So then you're
Correct.
talking about, like, a lot of times we're using Zoom rooms for that, where we have a Zoom room on a computer that's outputting that out. We'd have 2 of them, and then we'd do a mix minus, and we'd cut back and forth between their videos, because you really need low latency. And if as soon as you say we're not going to talk to each other, I would immediately move to SRT or Zixi or something else that's going to be more reliable between the two, a more reliable connection between those connections. So when they say we want to say something like hi and talk to each other, I always tell the client that changes that entire pipeline from good, like it'll be a good interaction, but it won't necessarily be a great, the video won't be as good and the audio won't be as good, but you can make it literally twice as good, or at least 25% better to 50% better by not interacting. So, like if they just say, now we're going to, hey, take it away, literally that instead of a hi, how you doing, changes the entire pipeline of what you do. And so, because you don't have to interact and you don't have that uncomfortable back and forth. Or you have that uncomfortable back and forth and you say, we're just going to do SRT for us, with a 1 second delay, and it looks like satellite, so, but it changes what you can do. But as soon as you move down to that real-time over consumer connections,
Well,
you're going to drop frames. You're not going to have as good audio. Those are all the costs of doing that. Whereas if you give yourself a little bit more time for that transport, in a way that doesn't make it great to interact, but does make it great to stream, you're going from one event to another. Now, what I would do with the ASL is probably just Zoom, cut them out and put them in that's what we do a couple times a week. Take ASL and we'll cut them out and put them in a box over Zoom. And then the big thing with that is just making sure that they're on. For us with ASL, how long are you going to have them do it? Because they're, when you think about ASL, there's typically it's 20 to 30 minutes max for us anyway, unless you get a really flexible ASL. So if you have an hour event, usually we're booking 2 ASL operators or interpreters. So something to think about too. Next question.
And my apologies to Doug for reading signer as senior. I first thought it was senior, and I thought it was a gentleman from Mexico, so I messed that up terribly. Stuart Fairweather is back with tonight. I enjoyed or endured a Zoom-based film premiere with other members of the cast and crew and saw people's feeds that are not office hours standard. What strategies can we use to recruit people with poor Zoom vision and sound to be examples in a hire me to fix your Zoom quality advert?
So it was a little rough. It was. I mean, what we try to do is tell people that this is, I'm not. I would say this. You're just dressing up or not dressing up based on what you're doing. I'm not dressing up as much right now because the lens I put on is a little too dark. But we always tell people that, you want to look your best. You're going to be in front of a bunch of people. It depends, I think that people, like even now, we've got over 150 people in the room with us. If you count the streams and everything else that we're looking at, 150, 200 people that are all hanging out with us right now. And there'll be more people that watch it later. I don't think people think about that in a virtual environment. They just think of it, well, it works for me in meetings and I talk to my parents or my kids or whatever about it, but they don't think about how do I look in front of hundreds of people is not something that they're being conscious to. And that's something that you want to have at least a minimum. Go ahead, Jeffrey, and then George.
What's interesting is the WWE has been doing these virtual boards where people are sitting in the crowd, and they have a very strict series of rules that you have to abide by just to be in the crowd of any of these shows. And I would check with them to see what they're doing, because every time that I see the monitors pass by, they're always in the right type of frame. They're not slouching. They're not
That's
using
just,
virtual backgrounds or anything like that.
it's just participant prep. That's all it is.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, like when we're prepping people for an event where they're going to actually be on camera, we send them a questionnaire that asks them a bunch of things. You know, what kind of computer connections, all the little bits and pieces. We get a speed test. We make sure that they're going to be on Ethernet. We talk, kind of get a sense of what they have. Then a lot of them we send kits, but we at least call them and have a conversation with them for half an hour to make sure that they're like lined up and we understand what their background is, and we train them on where their head has to sit. And there's this whole like process to it. Then we bring them in before the show an hour, half an hour to an hour before, and we tighten everybody up and make sure they all look good in relationship to each other. Then we have a show,
In my point, it's more the fact that they probably don't have time to do that with every single fan.
I bet you they do.
Have some. You think so?
I bet you they do. Absolutely.
Okay.
Like they're not just bringing people in. Like it's we mass produce that, but we definitely we can process a couple hundred people, with enough people. We have 6 people on the back end, and you open up a 4-hour window before the event and you just push everybody through it. That's what we call Persane prep. Persane is how they fish for tuna in the open seas, big net that goes around and pulls them in. So a Persane process for us means that we're going to just grab everybody and just pull them all through rather than going through that half an hour for each person. But you tweak everybody as they come through. There's like a little check-in, and like Grant, was explaining that they, for the ones that Blue does, every person has to check in to get into those, like every person. And they load balance across 6 or 8 or 10 people to see everybody, to make sure that they're connecting well. So you definitely, if you look at like what Madeline was talking about yesterday, when we think about big shows, we don't, we think about how could we do it with 3 of our friends, but that was 150 people for every night, working on that, so anytime you start talking about real broadcast, you start talking about infrastructure and labor. Stuart?
These are all lovely answers on how we improve our quality of our output. But what I really want to know is how to get people to volunteer to be in an ad to hire me to fix streams without offending them, without annoying them, without putting them offside, so that they're actually interested in being the example of bad quality to show how good we can do good quality.
Well, a lot of times the way I do it is on Medium. You'll see some of mine are, I don't talk to them about it. I just write articles, and I've written a bunch of them that I put up in different places, but usually that's trying to push people a certain path. Then people read it, and you post like, hey, I wrote this, or I wrote this, or whatever. And then you put it on your LinkedIn or whatever. And that's a very subtle way of, you can be very cutting and rough in an article that you could say things that you couldn't say directly to your clients or to potential clients. But it's an article that makes it clear how you feel about it. But it's a slow process. We didn't start this way. We did it because it's kind of a subtle and just kind of a constant press. George?
Alex, let me just take a quick second to say to everyone that's on this panel, everyone in the audience, everyone that's been on this panel. Yesterday I was live streaming on a job, and while I was doing that, I was watching Office Hours at the same time, with the assistance of Loopback, being able to listen to both audios. And I have to tell you, I was hearing more of Office Hours, and the rest of it, I'm not going to say too much about it. I was just taking a feed, but kudos to all of us here, all of you, for making audio a priority, because Office Hours was really good and the clarity is 100%. And the audio on the other side was not that great. I just have to tell you that.
Well, and we, for most of our events now, we require that we send out a kit. Like I won't take on the job. Like I just won't take it on if they don't want to buy the kit and have the prep, for their speakers. I just say I'm busy enough. I don't need to keep on working on bad shows. So I just get very, like, I'm very cut and dry about it, but I'm fortunate enough to be about as busy as I want to be. But I don't want to, I just kind of push off jobs because the other thing is you want people to know, because what happens is you go to a big job, you work on one of these, and yours looks completely different than what everyone else has. And that client looks really great. And what happens is, like I have another job that just came in. It's a pretty good job. And it came in from a client that had never seen a Zoom like what we did. like they, and it was difficult. They were like, oh, I don't know if we should spend this much. And I don't know. But then they did it. They looked great. They felt great. Their one of their partners said, "Hey, how did you guys get that zoom to look so good?" And they sent them to us. So this is the only company you can work with, and so that's how that. But by doing that, you only need a couple of those. You remember you're doing an event for a couple hundred people. One or two of them think that this is the best thing they've ever seen. So the thing is, what you don't want to do is fill up your whole pipe with things with junk. That's as producers, we do this all the time. We fill up our pipe with junk. And then when the good ones come through, we either don't have enough time to pay attention to them, and really make them great, or we, just don't, we don't get them because we can't take them on, or we, all those things. And so you want to try to, kind of, if you can get to a point where you're paying the bills, then really be really picky about the things you bring in so that it keeps on taking you where you want to go rather than just surviving. Anyway, next question.
Guy Cochran, our own Guy Cochran says, Doug, how did Chuck's Unity comms emergency go?
Did that work out?
It went fine. I mean, I never listened in, but I could see that all 4 people were logged in just fine. So I assume it went okay.
That's awesome.
So, hey, you know what? That's exactly why we're here, to help.
Yeah.
And yeah. I've been there in that emergency thing. Like you go from 0 to 100 and just like that. And no, I was glad to help, and when I can.
No, that's definitely the goal. I mean, what happened yesterday was a perfect example, and we're doing this all day. I mean, a lot of us are back and forth, getting help from each other and everything else. And that's the goal, is to keep building that community where you can get something solved that fast. And it was amazing. Thanks for doing that, Doug.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I've been helped by a lot of people here too. So yeah. That was my chance to give back.
Absolutely. Next question.
Tony Mobley from Newman, Georgia, and the panel occasionally says, should the new Sony camera webcam software update be considered a solution for an Office Hours panelist?
It's fine. I think most of these Canon and Sony webcam solutions are trying to kind of jerry rig into, like something it wasn't built for, to do something that it can kind of do. Jason?
They all suffer from the same problem, which is that these are cameras that are not designed to be USB encoders. So as such, they always suffer from either a lack of, either they overheat, or they basically just get choked because it has to be, compatible down to USB 2. That's been my experience.
The problem we've had with older Canon cameras with trying to use that webcam, and I haven't used the Sony one, so I don't know for sure, but with the Canon one, we're getting either some kind of black around the edges, either a small amount or a large amount of black around the edges. We're not getting a clean aperture. Go ahead, Sky.
I've been using the Lumix, the GH2, which the battery life isn't as good, but the GH4 is awesome. And I've had friends that use the GH5, but I think the door between the broadcast and the DSLR world at Panasonic.
But are you using a webcam? Is there a webcam out of the GH5, or do you have to put it through some kind of converter?
Copy that. Yes, I am having to put it through the
doing that with those cameras works all the time. It's the USB out of those cameras that I haven't found to be great.
Stepping away.
I do think that next year, based on this year, next year next year or the year after, all the cameras will be able to do it. They'll all have some kind of USB-C out, because it's just now everyone gets how important.
I'm kind of curious to what the camera that Guy showed the other day, the Panasonic one. It's like, really? I was just buying into the Blackmagic family, and now, okay, Panasonic, drag me back.
Yeah, I don't know if I'm dragged back by that, but I think it looks like a good camera. I mean, I could see it, but I think that the thing that Blackmagic benefits from is ecosystem. Like that's Panasonic doesn't really have the same ecosystem where I can get to everything and I have APIs to everything, and it gives you more time as a manufacturer to adjust, because it's really hard to your point, it's really hard to unwind that connection. Next question.
Can we just get Blackmagic to put SDI on their plugs on their cameras?
That's just crazy.
A Mitchell's in Washington asks, for a guest like Madeline or even Brian Van Ark, what kinds of questions would work best? Are those about the most current projects, or those about more complex, well-known past projects better? Which are better or easier for the guest? Take away.
Go ahead, Sky.
Because I'm working with people that have a past history recently, they're willing at least the two humans that I've talked with, and it's Graham and Madeline, they are saying, yeah, I'm kind of interested in talking about the future and what I'm doing now, but you have a relationship with me from your past and you want to relive that again and be touched by it. So both of these two humans are very gracious and willing to play. That's what I did then. But the engaging thing, and I've heard that talked about with musicians, like Mick Jagger talked about, yeah, you want to play some of your old stuff, but you still want to keep evolving too. So it's a tricky thing for an artist from my perspective of what I've heard, but that's an outsider.
Yeah, go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, it happens at every level. I was watching an interview not long ago with Paul McCartney, and it was like he had something to plug, but it's like nobody would really let him plug anything because they were so engaged with his history with the Beatles and everything and diving into that. And it's the same thing I felt. He was being incredibly gracious. At the end, he got in the little plug for the new music, which is part of what, he's interested in. That keeps him going. But you understand that people want to know about that history.
I mean, the thing that I think I'm looking for, I've done a lot of interviews, and I'm looking for what am I going to ask them that they haven't been asked before, because they've been asked the same things all the time, and there's some things that I hesitate to ask. Like when I was talking to Brian Vander Ark, I was hesitant to ask him to play Freshman, but he knew that we all wanted to hear Freshman. So he was like, play Freshman. But then I asked him to play a deep track at the end of that one. I asked him to play Penny is Poison, which is a deep track out of Villains. Now what that does, it happens to be my favorite song on the album, so it was easy. But it's the other thing it does is it says, I know you. I either know you or I've studied you. Like when we brought Peter Hillman on, I've been listening to Peter Hillman for 30 years. So I knew, and I've had him in the studio a couple times, and so being able to kind of draw some of that out, and they'll want to talk about certain things. There's certain tape that people play. So you also have to figure out how to like with Madeline yesterday, I interrupted the tape so that we could just start getting into questions, because, she just serving the person you're interviewing is just trying to serve the audience and be interesting, and they'll just keep talking, like if they're good, like Madeline, they'll just keep talking. She would have talked for an hour, and that's great. But the thing is how do we, move that conversation to mechanics? What you're looking for is what are the mechanics that person likes to talk about? And so you kind of ping around it and push for it, because you'll find that, they're interested in something about what they do. If they're an artist, there's something about it that they're passionate about. And what I'm looking for is what are they nerds about? They're nerds about something. Like Madeline is a nerd about NPR. So I asked her about Weekend Edition, like Weekend Edition, because I'm a nerd about NPR as well. So it was easy so you have to also know it well enough. But you have to remember that, if you're listening to Terry Gross, just know that, there's a producer outside of Terry Gross. There's a producer for every day that's doing all the research and everything else. And Terry Gross does some of it, but there's a producer that's managing all of that for that day. And there's a different one managing the next day. And there's a whole army that does the research for it. So our job, as we bring more people in, is to do that, when we find out that Madeline is talking or Graham is talking next week, thanks to Sky, Graham will be here. That's right. Sky, did I say that right?
Awesome.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Cool. Yeah. So, but our job, what I want to do is send out some links so that we have already looked at the IMDb pages. We've already looked at the stuff. So that we really know that person. But what we're looking for is what are they passionate about, and then try to tease that out of them, because then they just go off. Like she knew so much about mechanics. Like what was great with Madeline is having her talk about how they produce the show, and the process of the show and the bits of the show. And we don't want to. It's fine to hear her history, but what we really want to hear is how does she think about that show and how does she think about that process. And so, as we work through questions, we want to be constantly looking for the mechanics and what they're nerds about, because everybody's nerd about something, And so it's just a matter of figuring out what are they nerdy about, and oftentimes they'll say it in a comment. There'll be some comment about, I do this all the time. Well, okay, well then you look for it. Like they say, I make bread all the time. Well, then we're going to talk, I love to do that, or I do whatever. look for some, don't worry about whether it's in line with what you were planning. You're kind of searching for that process. Go ahead, Sky, and then Jeffrey.
One of the things that in working with Graham for the last 3 years, the challenge has been of how to get him to listen, because he will put in a tape. And what's been fun is the long relationship now is he will talk for long time, and he's got such a great British accent that you'll just keep mesmerizingly listening to him, but then you'll come away and go, what did he say? And I reflected back to him on that, and he says, well, that's not very good. So it's been an interesting conversation to help him modify and get stronger in the moment concept, rather than just relying on the old stuff. So
and the thing that I, it's hard now because he's had so much trouble in the public eye, but Charlie Rose was really good at it. Like he's really good at like just cutting you off and pushing you over and cutting in. Unfortunately, he's really good at a lot of other things he shouldn't have been in. So, but he, as his style, like he's very, very, he's a model for how to kind of dig into that conversation and dance with the person that he's interviewing. And a lot of them are. We've worked with Katie Couric and Soledad O'Brien, and both of them are just incredible at cutting to the chase all the time. Like they just cut, they've done it so often, they cut to the chase, and you do have to be willing to just cut the person off and kind of move them off, but you have to figure out how you're going to do that. You can't just say, oh, we don't want to listen to that anymore. You have to figure out what's the new question that's related to something they just said. Jeffrey?
In the talk show world, what I've been told, it's called smoothing the butter, and there's 2 parts to it, and it's about expirable versus evergreen content in talk shows. Office hours, it might not work as well here, but the idea is you gotta warm up the butter first before you can spread it across the bread.
Well, that's what.
So you throw them a couple softball questions or a story that they can start with, and then they'll finish with content.
That's how we started. I asked them how they got here, how they get started, and how they do. Like there's a very set number of questions that we want to kind of get to that we're interested in, but then we want to. I'm also getting you all up to speed, introducing that person to all of you so that you can start asking questions. Because I warned people, I said, don't be ready to talk for 10 minutes. Like you'll be ready to talk for 10 minutes, and after that, the audience will take over. Anyway, next question. Let's move on. We're
okay.
On this one.
Moving to Stuart Fairweather from Melbourne, Australia. Oh, wait a second. No, that was many nVidia GPUs support hardware-based H.264 encoding. Is there any zoom setting to make use of that feature?
I don't think so. Go ahead, Jason.
So Zoom a couple weeks ago announced an update to their broadcaster rig, their software package, and that will do cool things, but it's yet to come out. So yeah, in video under advanced, you can say use my GPU to basically smooth and denoise my video feed. Other than that, I don't think there's anything.
I mean, and we'll see what the API opens up, as far as options, and then NDI and that type of thing that we hear is coming. Stuart?
I was just thinking with the H.264 encoder built into the GPU, it would take load off the system and enable a much better feed rather than trying to do the encode in software or in the CPU.
I don't think we're paying that much in the encode. I think that we're getting bad encodes because of the CPUs. I think we're just getting bad encodes because of the real-time nature and the bandwidth it's allowed to use. I think that's where we're really paying the price on that one. Next question.
Ivan Orbegozo of Mercer Island says, is there a way to spotlight a welcoming slide in full screen when you start a Zoom webinar without showing the panelists' video?
In a webinar? Well, in a webinar, it's relatively easy. But go ahead, Mickey, and then Stuart.
Yeah, essentially spotlighting would do that. That would hide the other panelists' video.
I mean, what I have is I'm usually an operator. I'm an operator for the webinar. And then what I do is I'm using something like Mimo Live to, and maybe what you're talking about is if you do screen share of that image, then you see, you might see people off to the side or something like that in the, a little picture of them, in the picture-in-picture that it can do. What I do is I use some kind of video, whether it's OBS or I'm using Mimo Live. You could use vMix. I'm feeding that window all of my graphics. In fact, that's the only reason I'm there. They'll know, people won't ever see me as an operator. I have a still up there all the time, or a video or whatever, but there's one window that's going to play all of that. And then I'm playing the video into that window and I spotlight it. And then it's full screen. You don't see anybody. There's no picture in picture. There's nothing else. It's just there. And I can jump from one thing to the next. I can play music. I can do all those other things that you want to do. And it's relatively seamless as opposed to the screen share thing, which is just kind of a, I mean, we really try to avoid using screen share if we can. Go ahead, Stuart.
When we join and we've got our logo up, or like our our
Profile
thumbnail
picture.
image, yeah, that one, brain in neutral. Couldn't we just have a corporate logo there instead?
You could, but it's square. I don't quite understand why, but it's not full. It's not full aperture. You know, I'm sure that there's a good reason to make it square, maybe so that people can't fake that they're there and they can't just put a picture in. But the image is square in, you know, or whatever the logo is. You always have the gray bars on the other side. But I highly recommend, if you're doing anything that you need a professional output, you need either a ATEM Mini or some kind of software switcher to feed one of the screens. It just takes away all the work. I mean, it makes everything, it makes an entire event feel smooth. And you're not constantly going back and forth between the shenanigans with the screen share. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, on to Stuart's point, like just know that in the webinar platform, if someone's video is off, like when your profile picture is seen, like for us panelists, the attendees do not see that. They don't see anyone that has their video off. There's no blank frame there.
Yeah. Anyway, but the way to make all of this work better is some version of a switching software to manage what's inputting, and that can be movies and other things. The only time you give that up is if someone has the reason we use screen share, if we want to show resolution, is because of the you get a higher resolution with screen share but lower frame rate. So especially if someone has really complex PowerPoint slides, then you need to use screen share because you can't read the text. I try to tell clients that if the text is so small that it doesn't look good in a lower resolution, then you probably have too much text on the slide. But, you know, educators, government, those are the two big ones. Scientists, those are the three big ones that just believe in how much text can I squeeze onto one page. I mean, I just take a Word document and just put it into a PowerPoint. Those are the three groups that we deal with, that I deal with constantly, are educators, scientists, and government types that just live on small text on a screen. And I've given up I used to try to get them to let me reformat it, but then it was so much work, and then there were so many opinions that I just gave up and just said, okay, we'll just do screen share.
Spend too much time reading white papers.
Yeah, exactly. Go ahead, Nick, or Bill. Next question.
Okay, Paul Wallace of Austin, Texas. Anyone have any experience with the Bluedriver F3 Bluetooth microphone audio interface from JK Audio? I'm not having a lot of luck pairing it with a Portal Plus.
I don't think it's gonna. I believe it uses a different Bluetooth protocol, so I don't think it uses what you think it uses. Go ahead, Mickey.
I have the M3, which is the one with a male XLR on it, and it allows me to get phone taps essentially. Like if we're shooting documentaries, it has a male XLR. I can feed that into my recorder. There are two modes on it, and if Jeffrey could bring up that photo again. There are two modes on it. One is headset, the other one is phone. If it's in phone mode, it acts like as if it were a Bluetooth speaker or a Bluetooth headset. But when it's in headset mode, it acts as if it's a host, as if like it's a phone or a computer. So you want to be on phone mode. And although like specifically with working with a portal that like I have no experience with.
There is one thing to note on this page is notice it's saying Bluetooth 3.0. That might be a problem right there.
Go ahead, John Edelson.
We use the reporter version of this, and it has an HD voice, so you could get higher audio quality over phones, and that was important when we're trying to get natural sounds. You're going to have a real hard time hooking up to the portal. The portal is very sensitive about what Bluetooth gets connected to it. And what Mickey was talking about, it's really great when it's in that earphone mode because it's transmitting the full bandwidth or full range of audio. but when it's in the headset mode, it limits the frequency range.
And you're coming in really quiet. Like I'm not.
Sorry about that. I was moved. I've moved around. You know, I'm not in my normal location, and
that's better.
Sun keeps moving me. Sorry about that, guys.
No, it's all good. Next question.
Gabriel Ung from Malaysia says, I've been asked to produce a Zoom webinar. What's the best way to run a production with 4 panelists with a moderator when the webinar platform doesn't have a breakout room? They would want to screen share their slides as well.
There's the best way, and then there's the way that you end up doing it, or you know that. So those two things can be different. In my opinion, the best way is to have you do all the slides. Again, to use the video switching that I talked about earlier, I load up all the slides, and I will run all the slides for them. Then they just call to the next slide. It's a much simpler thing for them, and you're not dealing with them trying to figure out how to screen share. If the slides are dense and you have to do screen share, the best tool for that is Keynote, Apple Keynote, because you can do present to window rather than present to screen. And so it does a full clean aperture of your Keynote, but in a little screen that you can share to Zoom. And so that for denser ones, that works. Now, you don't want them to send your PowerPoint slide to you if you're going to use it in Keynote. Have them export it out as JPEGs. Just export your entire, make sure it's 16:9, have them just export all of them out as JPEGs, make sure they look at them and it looks the way they want. Then you just throw them all in. You can just drop them in as a group into Keynote, and they'll all just come into slides. Then you just go through it, and they're all, if they're building slides, that's a more complicated thing, but most people don't do that. You know, I do a lot of that, so I can't do that, but the most speakers will not have building slides. They'll just have statics. If they really want to do building ones, then they do have to do their own. There are ways for you to do that. We've done it with, you know, a variety of ways of controlling it. I know it'll sound crazy, but sometimes we've had GoToMeeting where they're in GoToMeeting looking at our slide. We use 2 different platforms so we don't get confused, but they're in video on one and then they're just tapping the other one and controlling it. You know, that's having you do the slides will make it better than having them do it. Having people on the far end constantly saying, okay, now I'm going to do a screen share, and now I'm going to do a screen share, and it's better for them just to talk, you know. And then you have to gently tell people that they're losing their audience in 30 to 60 seconds when they put up those slides. People go to passive mode almost immediately, and we've seen it here. But start showing slides, and people will go into, you know, one after the other, and people will go into passive mode really fast. So they're kind of they're what I call presentation poison. You know, lots of slides. It's just, you know, you want to go to them and show them, but you know, if you have something you really want to illustrate, but if you just sit on slides, you've wiped out your, you know, you're wiping out your audience. It's clear cutting them. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, and going perfect on the slides. The going with the panelists and the moderator, it really depends on how you really want to make it look in the end of things. So if you're just doing the screen capture, having them turn on and off their video can be pretty daunting. Having the expectation that they're going to stay on the whole time actually does help your production a little bit better. But it can be a fight back and forth if they don't know what they're doing and how to mute and unmute themselves.
Is there I can't say it anyway. So if everybody's up to speed, you know, on the same Zoom, then you can use the multi-spotlight all the time, and then it works great. And then you just let everybody stay on, you know, mute their mics, but leave their video on. That way we don't have them constantly muting and unmuting. Anyway, we're going to go into speed round now. Next question.
Jimmy in Louisville is looking for experiences with Crisp AI, that's KRISP, the application that filters out virtually all non-human noise. Are there similar applications that are better?
I don't know about software. I mean, there's definitely, you know, there's the noise assist and other things that are available, Cedar for hardware, but I don't know any. I think that's probably the most effective in real time. Next question.
Paul Wallace from Austin said, someone named River Delano messaged me and says, I'm still really interested in seeing what a strong Discord community can look like. And as far as I know, Discord does not promise they will not sell, rent, or share users with the platform, which is usually based on user content. Please comment.
I don't have a strong comment about it. It's useful. I think that there'll be a new kind of platform coming that is probably more privacy based, but I don't know. I just don't put anything in there that I'm worried about. Next question.
James Babbitt from here in San Diego. Great interview with Madeline Smithberg. What types of guests would you like to include on Thursdays, and how do we recommend a guest?
You can reach me on Discord. Ties right into the last one. But if you have ideas but reaching me on Discord directly is probably the best way to do it. And we're looking for all kinds of performers and artists and people in the production. It's just a place for us to ask questions, find an external person that might bring some new knowledge in that may not be here as a regular, but can for an hour bring up some new thinking that we can bring into. So that's around the creative process. That we have other places to talk about audio or video or other things or events, but around the creative process of creating shows, that's what we're looking for there.
Anne is an attorney, and she's looking at starting a community. She's no longer an attorney, but she's doing this spiritual based community. So she wants to.
Well, you should jump into a couple of them. Jump into ours. Jump into a couple other ones.
That's what I'm telling her, just to jump in and try it out. She's trying to get a Discord link so she can play around with it.
All she has to do is get here early.
Yeah, that's like.
All right, next question.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Jeff Widgren of Overland Park says, Alex, do you only sell the kits, or do you at times ship and have them return the kits?
In COVID, we don't have them return the kits. We used to rent the kits out, and we would charge about 60% of the retail value of the kit because of the calculated loss of how many people would send them back. But we don't do that right now. To us, they're all disposable. Once we send them out, they're out. And our kits range between about $350 to $400 per unit, up to about $20,000 a unit. Just depends on what they want. Next question.
Brant Kruger of Minneapolis says, no matter what settings I seem to tweak, Zoom records my meeting at 640 by 360. If my coworker creates the meeting, she gets the download at 1600 by 720. Support just shrugs. Any thoughts?
It's probably because she's using screen share. So that's the one thing if you do screen share and she's got 1600 by 720 on her screen, that's what they're all going to be that way. If we do any screen share here, whatever the resolution is of the maximum size during that event, your whole thing will come back that way. It does not mean that it will be sharper. It just means it'll come back at that many pixels. So it's just taking the 360, it's taking the video that's 360 by 640 by 360 and stretching it up. That doesn't make it 1600 by 720. It just makes it a softer version of that. So it's still, the video is still what it is in the record. It's just stretching it up so that you get the full resolution. If you were showing screens, they're not all soft and beat up in the record. Anyway, next question.
George Kennedy from the panel says, can you talk about APIs and how they're used with video platforms like Restream.io, Wowza, and Akamai?
I mean, the main thing is to automate the connections, and set up unique interfaces to be able to do that. Go ahead, George.
I know we're going to speed around here. So maybe we could do a second hour on it. I'm really because there's so much going on right now in the industry and it's so much to digest. So I want to kind of get a handle of what APIs are and how they relate to video.
Yeah, I mean, the main thing is that we had like an API that you would, as just an example of how we use them, would inside of Commenda, which is the back end of this of how Makana works, you could start an event. When it started, it built a new event on our side that we could operate. It would tie in. It would go into Facebook and start an event in Facebook Live. You just hit live from our interface, and it would create an event on Facebook and then start it, so that we didn't have to do all that mechanics, to make that work. But we're using the API to do that, and you could set it up. For instance, I mean, you could set up a skill on the Alex thing, where you can say start stream, and you could literally say start stream, and it would create a YouTube event turn on your Elemental link, tie it together, create, turn on your Raspberry Pi and have it playing video out, into that link, and all of that would happen from a voice command. And I've seen it, so it does work. So it's just a matter of figuring out things that are complex that you want to make, especially things that all have to happen together really quickly and be tied together. The API gives you a big advantage. But we'll talk more about that. Yep. Next question.
Gabriel Ung is back with a pretty big question. What are the pros and cons of hiring freelancers versus hiring staff for live production, cost, skill set, and so forth? Thank you.
When you hire freelancers, you're externalizing your skill set. So if they get really good at it, they're the ones that know how to do it, not you. It's also, they'll almost always be more expensive if you are doing a high volume of work is when you want to have a lot of people. But what freelancers allow you to do is customize your solution to the problem at hand. It's why you don't want a huge staff. You do want a core staff of people that you can depend on that really know how to do all the things that you need to do. And then you freelance out because I pick the best person for each operation. I don't pick the sound person that I have or the animator that I have in-house. That's what everybody else does. They pick their staff, whatever. If they have them on staff, you use them because they're part of the overhead or they're part of the show. But it allows you to hand pick the right person for the right job, and so I think that's the advantage. But it does get expensive when you start to, you either have a bunch of people on overhead or but I think in general you want it to be as dense as possible. Having a core staff is important. Any other, and we'll talk about that a little bit more on the next hour too. Next question. We're running a little heavy, but we're going to go ahead and finish these off.
Yeah, Ken Jones in Seattle is cross-posting from Bob Middleton from the Discord asking, explain to a beginner the main differences between a Focusrite Scarlett 4i4 Gen 3 versus an ALLEN&HEATH ZED I10 analog mixer for a simple home setup. What does one do that the other doesn't? He'd like an option of more than one mic in and out.
Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, if you go with something like the ALLEN&HEATH board, it's an actual mixer. You're mixing the signals in the analog domain, and when you go out of it, like you have a choice of analog outs with this specific mixer, or it could also act like an interface. Now, I'm looking at the Z10i. It's a 4 in 4 out interface, so you can I assume pick which channels go out as an interface. So in terms of it acting as like an interface, it's the same deal. You have 4 channels in, 4 channels going out, like between the two. But the Z10 has 4 preamps built in, as opposed to the Scarlett, which has just 2 preamps. And of course, like you end up with having an actual board that's mixing the signals together, as opposed to the 4i4, which is just an interface.
Yeah, and it just depends on whether you want that too. That processing is going to bring with it typically noise. So noise and an external control that you can't control with some kind of interface internally. I don't use analog boards that much myself, just because I don't feel like I have remote control or control. Go ahead, Jason.
As a rule, though, I would say ALLEN&HEATH any day over anything Focusrite that's analog.
Yep, I'd agree. Next question.
Tim Corbin of Baltimore says, if you don't want remote presenters to call the next slide, what remote cue or switching tool would you use? For example, the Octocue and similar.
I have not played with the Octocue, and I think it's come up here a couple times, and I keep on thinking that I need to play with that. In the past, we've done a variety of different things. I know that Grant, to talk about APIs, Grant figured out a way basically to have it a web page that the person could just go next slide, and it would just it would pass that USB command on a local computer to move to the next slide, which can work. We've used USB to IP. So USB to IP is it takes a USB signal, puts it over the internet, comes out as a USB signal on the other end. And what that allowed us to do is have the speakers actually be able to use literally a DSAN perfect cue clicker And then they were very comfortable with it, and they were able to just hit the button the way they do for every show that they do. And it meant the same thing to them, and it just moved our slides forward. So it was, it's pretty effective there. And then, you know, there is the other thing, the one that works really well if they're on a Mac platform is Keynote Live, which is just you're gonna subscribe to their Keynote. And when they move forward, it moves forward on the Keynote. And they just have their own local version. But that depends on a lot of people who are doing slides are not on an Apple platform because it's. Anyway, go ahead, Jeffrey.
Another thing you can do is you can do a phone-to-phone FaceTime type contact. Now you don't have to call them, of course. You can also do a Facebook thing, or as Sky just showed me, you can go through Discord to call somebody from person to person. And so if they're not on the screen doing this and this, they can give you a visual cue like this, and then you see it on your phone, and then you can advance it to the next slide.
I mean, yeah, it's. Yeah, the hard part is most of the time they're going back and forth, and so having them do something visually doesn't really get them where I think most people want to go. Go ahead, John Petto. Didn't we have a guy on the panel that created the pickle? Did you ever try using that one? Well, that's what Grant was using. He built a web page that did it, that you could just tap frame forward. I don't know where that went, but he's got one where you can do that. So it's definitely, again, ours was the simplest one, which was just a USB through the internet. Was a super simple one to do it. It's just like a little piece of hardware. But I'm surprised. The best software is, again, Keynote, to do that. But there's not a lot of great ways to do that, in my opinion. But I'll try the Octocue again. Next question.
Greg Yotes in Gridley, California, I think. Is it a good idea to have a dedicated computer with graphics presentations that can be switched to a Zoom and keep the presenter and their camera with their own computer? Yes. I mean, having the presenter trying to manage both of those things on the same computer is just, again, when you start talking about wanting to have a great event, you move on from everyone's just going to screen share and then show their thing. That's kind of basically it's when you're dealing with like, again, I rent my own hotel room, and I'm gonna rent a projector from the hotel, and then I'm gonna plug my computer in. That is one way to run a show. Everyone plugs their computer in, and then they type and they talk and they do their little presentation. But there's some point where brands decide we're bigger than that, and we're gonna have a team manage that, and it's gonna go from one thing to the next, and it's going to feel clean, and there's going to be walk-on music, or there's going to be something that's going to build up, or it's going to feel from a user's perspective as a real event. And so you just have to decide where your Zoom lives in that area. If you're okay with people plugging in their computers and then hoping it works, and does anyone have a VGA connector? If you're okay with that, which at a certain budget and a certain thing, then you should do it that way. But when people start asking I really want it to be a refined event, and I really want to move my brand forward, then they start having a different computer and a different person running it. And you start to tighten all those little screws to make it feel like it's more important, and so it's just, it's kind of that's the kind of the progression for a lot of folks. And it just depends on where they are in the food chain. Anyway, so we're going to go ahead and shift gears now that we've gotten through that one, and we're going to talk. It seemed like people are pretty interested in having the conversation about, we talk a lot about tech every day, but talking a little bit about the business end of things, and how we get things done. And I think we're going to keep on playing with this idea of whether it's talking about copyright, or talking about getting business, or talking about, we might even have an hour on accounting, or billing, or how we manage all those things, to do those. But it seemed like it would be interesting to have a conversation. So if you have questions, we talked on Monday about kind of being producers, and how do you work with clients. This one, the intention of this one anyway, today, it'll be driven by the questions. So we'll see how it pops up. But the intention of it today is really talking about as a freelancer. If you're going to work for somebody, what are the things that you should know about doing that, and I'll riff a little bit until someone raises their hand. But I think that I do think that there's a lot of people don't tell you what to do, like you just show up and they don't tell you how to be successful. So the goal here is to talk a little bit about the little things that no one's telling you about being successful as a freelancer, and how to be more successful in that area. And the thing that
I try to, when I'm training people to be freelancers, if I'm teaching at a school or teaching, there's a couple things that I try to remind them of. The first thing is that one of the things you always want to look for is how do I make my existence less stressful for the person who hired me? So there, that it seems like, so when you ask for lots of little things, that starts to make it harder, for the person. And you can do a little bit of that, and you want to be particular about things, but just be careful about what you're asking for and whether it makes a difference, in that area. So for instance, a lot of times I charge, I'll charge whatever my hourly rate is or my day rate. I don't charge clients for a lot of little things. I don't charge them for my meals. I don't try to figure that out. I just incorporate it into my hourly, into my day rate. My day rate is all these things, it's just, we're not going to talk about that. We're just going to this is my day rate. If you agree to the day rate, I don't say 10-hour day. People pay me and I work as many hours as I'm going to work, in that day, and I work with a bunch of freelancers that are like that. And as a producer, you just get into that's a lot easier, and you just know that some days will be hard, and you're still, as a producer, managing people because you get them too tired and they can't do good work. So you're not trying to do that. But the more you can get to a more flat rate, it's all these little things that start to aggravate people. And so you want to think through that. Other things that get into it are for a lot of producers is knowing where you're at, that when someone feels like they can lean on you and you're there when they put their hand out without looking, and you're doing what you expect them to do without looking, you hire those people all the time. They're going to fill in and take that project down the path. So when you're on a job, it's not like you have to be available all the time. But I know that as producers, if you're on a job, right now we're on events, just being if I text somebody and they don't text back all day, if they don't text back in 2 minutes, it's fine. But if they don't text back all day, the chances of me wanting to work with them again starts to drop, because I'm trying to get a whole bunch of things done. And now I don't know where things are. Showing up on time is really important. And these are the generalities beyond knowing what you're doing. If you're really good at what you do, you can get away with a lot of things because there's not that many people that are actually really good at what they do. But these are the things that work most of the time. And I'll put up with a lot if they just solve these problems, being on time, but not being early. So I know that sounds like a crazy thing, but when you're 5 or 10 minutes before you are due, that takes something off of the producer to think about. When you're a half an hour before you were supposed to be there, you're now something that the producer has to manage. If you're coming to an event or whatever, if you get there really early or you're pinging them before that, because they're in slots, like a producer is looking at things that they're working on from here to here and here to here and here to here. So people think that they're being, as a freelancer, they think that they're doing better by being there, getting to an event early or getting to a thing early. But now you're something else that the producer is managing. So a lot of times I will, when I'm freelancing, I will be at the event an hour early, but I won't be in the venue. I will be somewhere near, I will be within a block. I will have already parked. I will already know how long it takes to get through security. And if I can get through security, I will. And then I'll go hang out on my phone or whatever, but I don't go into the venue space because I don't want to be something else they want to manage, but I do want to be on time and I do want to be around, and I can, if they, and so it's all those things you want to, kind of think through. Being in communication is a huge piece of it. Just telling people where things are all the time for producers is super important for producers, and these are all things that it's not any one of these things that makes the difference. It's just that I just noticed when I look at the freelancers that I work with all the time, that's what they do, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on the day rate. If a client says, oh yeah, save your receipts, we'll reimburse you for travel. Don't do that. That's a terrible idea. It's just, it's another point of friction and it's a waste of time. Figure out what your day rate is, especially if you're getting on an airplane or you're traveling for more than 30 minutes. Don't think twice about a day rate, because I promise you that they won't, and they don't want to have to think about it again. And yes, if you're good at things, you can absolutely get away with more, but really don't. It doesn't, it doesn't actually help you to be somebody else's pain in production. If you're not busy, you're in the way, period.
The other thing is to look at how their structure works. So there's some companies that just have to pay for the hotels and the flights and everything else. That's how they work. That's how their accounting works. They want to they want that line item there. And so the other side of that is don't tell them how you're going to, like how you want to do it. Like, even though I hate anyone paying for my hotels, because I don't know what I'm going to get. I don't know what it's going to look like. And I don't know if it'll really work when I get there. And so, and a lot of times I'm changing my flights so often. When I was traveling a lot, I was changing my flights I didn't know where in the world I was coming from. So it didn't help me I just had a budget for that flight. Like I had a budget, like there's $800 for this flight. Maybe that flight's going to be $5,000 because I can't give them a line item back because I'm coming from Africa and I thought I was going to be coming from San Francisco, and I built it into another budget on how to do that, but I don't have a line item for you to do that. So that became hard for me. But to your point though, is I try to avoid all the little stuff. I don't like dealing with receipts. So I don't want to have to like send them to the client, if I can avoid it at all. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, I think the number one rule for me when I was freelancing as a young guy is always spend the first 2 or 3 days listening and watching and nothing else. If you have a question, try to make it as concise as possible, and you'll observe a lot of things like, these people wrap cables over and under, but these are bigger cables and they want to do figure 8. You can bring in all this little stuff that you don't really have to talk to somebody about. You just kind of bring it on board because you're aware of what's happening. And I think Alex is spot on with this. The least friction you cause when you arrive on the set, the higher your chance of getting a call back next time.
And, one of the things that I look at generally is, like, for instance, how you dress. For corporate, at least, I dress one step below my client. I don't dress better than my client. I don't dress as good as my client. I separate myself. I just do one step below the client, but I don't go way further down either. Like when we worked in the White House definitely a couple, this was 4 or 5 years ago, but we came in with suits. We came in with dress shoes, except for the Steadicam operator, we were all dressed up, to the nines because we were in the White House, and what I was surprised at is that they said everybody else comes in jeans and t-shirts, like all the production crew, they don't care. It all matters. Just be clear, it all matters, and if you come in not looking good, people are going to make a whole bunch of decisions about you based on what you look like, in that sense. Go ahead, Bill.
To the point where I actually was talking to somebody say, yeah, you don't want to outwatch the person on the other side of the decision maker desk.
Right,
Literally,
exactly.
If you walk in with a Rolex and they have a Timex, they're going to think one way about you. It gets down to those little tiny subtle things. Sometimes it's weird.
No, and people will queue off on stuff. I've literally gotten jobs because I have this obsession for whatever reason that I wear French cuffs. With my suit, with my dress things, I've literally gotten, like, there's a queue for people who come from a certain background. That French cuffs mean that you come from a certain background. I don't. I came from a farm, but I wear French cuffs because of that. So you think about there's all these little cues that people have, and you're looking for what those cues are. But one of the big things is to really dress where you're going, not where you are, or not where you've been. Again, it doesn't come naturally to me. If I'm left to my own devices, I'm in cargo pants and flannel shirts. Pretty much, that's what I wear.
You got to get those pitchfork cufflinks, just
exactly.
to show them where you're from.
Great, yeah, exactly. But I'm not that. I don't naturally dress up at all. I don't naturally shave at all. So I don't. So you do those things because it makes sense for the clients. But you really want to think about how you fit into that team. Also, just don't talk about things that, once you get comfortable, maybe, but generally really be careful of personal, political, religion. Like, those are things that when you're in a team, you just don't want to talk about ever. Like, if you really get to know them over years, then you can start having those conversations. But those 3 things will have you, like, I have people that are really liberal and really conservative, and I don't hire them on a lot of jobs because I know that they won't like the subject matter, and then I'll hear about it, or they'll spin up especially nowadays, they'll spin up my team by talking about one or the other of those things. I hire people that I don't know what their affiliations are. I don't want to, like, if I know what they are, then they've already said too much, and that's the, in a crew. If we're out having beers and we talk about it, that's one thing. But if they talk about it on a set, you know, and you just had, these are all things that, again, I feel like no one tells you, you know, like no one tells you, like, don't do that. Cause the producer's just like, the producer's looking for, how do you build a cohesive team? If you do anything that doesn't build another thing is, start spinning up everybody over something, like you're frustrated because the tables aren't right, or the food isn't good, or whatever. Start spinning the whole team up on that. Yeah, you're not going to come back. Because the producer's like dealing with 1,000 things. Talking to the producer about it, maybe. Talking to the whole team about it is kind of like, that's a huge strike of like, I don't know if that's going to work, in my teams, because and everyone's doing the best they can, but what you find repeatedly is the people who don't think about that just look for, like, you'll always, if you talk to me and ask me what I want on a set, I'll just be like, I want food. I want food that doesn't require utensils. And like, that's all I ask for, it's like just protein that doesn't require utensils, usually a chicken sandwich. I'll just say chicken, something that doesn't require, I just don't want to have to use a fork, and that tells people that you're object oriented on the show, not trying to figure out what the catering is. Jeffrey and Jason.
And talking on the union side of things, because I've been in several different types of unions in production, is if you start doing things that are not on your list or on your pay grade, you will be, not only will you not be asked back, you probably will be asked to walk out of the building, and then you get out. You don't even get paid for that. Well, you probably get paid for that because you're union, but any show after that, you're probably done. Now, the other thing is, there's two things that I always see is, first of all, is the person that asks this, what are deemed as the I don't want to say stupid, silly questions, like how do I do over and over under, when you should already know how to do that. But what will ire me more is the person that comes back to me and says, can you believe that guy? Why did he just talk about that? He's been doing that all day, and just come back to you several times. I probably would hire the first person back before I'd hire the second.
Yeah, complaining in general, out of line is not. We encourage it. So on our show, I encourage it. I actually have teams. I encourage people to send me feedback at the end of shows, or sometimes during shows. I'll be like, how do I do this better? How do we do this better? How do we on live shows, when we're in the live event, we literally track it. And we have people put it, we'll send everybody a Google Doc and just say, fill stuff out. And we want you to put everything in, like, just the food wasn't right, the chairs were uncomfortable. We want to know what all those things are. And then we go through them all and try to find them. So we encourage that, but we encourage it on that form, not while you're not talking while you're sitting there. Go ahead, Jason.
Well, and as someone who's been a freelancer to, I don't know, maybe 700-800 clients at this point over the last 11 years or so, plus one on like the politics and religion thing, you would be surprised at how immediately people think that they agree with you, or that you agree with them, if you just keep your mouth shut. Just don't engage on the topic. Just leave it alone. Seriously, like just leave it alone.
Yeah. Comms.
Sorry, I have to say, push back on one thing, catering. If you're hiring a professional freelance crew, I will tell you one thing you must have available, and that's decent catering for crews.
I'm going to
Don't
totally
care
agree
about
with you.
your clients.
No, I totally agree with you. We'll have another hour about being a producer. That'll be the opposite of this. In fact, we'll probably just do it next Friday. So like dealing with crews is an entirely different thing,
Yeah, but you're confusing matters for the audience, because you're not making differentiation between the program or the people.
Well, so I'm talking about how producers view freelancers right now. Next Friday, we'll talk about how the freelancers look at the producers, and what producers need to do to make.
When you say producers, Alec, can you specify? Because I'm
the person running the show, the person accountable for that show.
Yeah, but from the client side or the production side?
Well, the production person that's accountable for the crew.
Right, that's what I wanted to be clear about, because I always refer to the client as the client and the crew as the crew, and never the twain is referred to. It's just to keep those differentiations.
The producer is the
I'm
person
a producer and a director and a writer.
Well, the producer, and for us
as opposed to a client marketing man.
Right. So for us, the producer is the person who sits between the crew and the client.
Yeah.
So
I'll just clarify where we're talking.
Right. So right now, what we're talking about is how that producer looks at, what you need to know as a freelancer for that producer. Next week, we'll talk about what you need to know as a producer for that freelancer, because there's a whole, to your point, always feed the crew. Always feed the crew well. Always get them great food. Always make sure that they're well caffeinated.
That'll be the one thing you'll get your crew working overtime.
but don't put sugar out until 4 o'clock in the afternoon.
No.
Yeah, so
Always
no
helps it.
M&Ms until 4. You put the bowl of M&Ms out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, not 10 o'clock in the morning, because then they'll all crash at 1. Anyway, Sky, go ahead, Sky.
Well, that clarity is brilliant, and that really helps, because I think now that everybody is in charge of their own camera, there is no camera person. Everybody's in charge of their own audio. There is no audio person, and so to delineate a crew and a client, and then that you're where the producer, just the food chain, and the punchline is, my dad said, know who your boss is and what they expect of you.
Well, and I think that a lot of times you have to be very careful, in corporate at least, everywhere, of knowing where you are in the food chain. We often say that there's a lot of people who are dolphins who think that they're the shark. They're not the shark, and then they act like sharks, and then they get eaten. And so you have to know where you live in that. So should I be talking to that client? If the producer's in the room, I'll wait until someone asks me to. Like if whoever the person above me in that food chain is talking, unless I'm invited to talk, I won't. I'll talk to them later about it, but they're running the show until I I won't interrupt. I'm not that. I used to talk all the time. So I'm not telling you this is the way I always did it. This is the way, I spent a solid decade having a lot of opinions that I would share, all the time. And I learned, that's how you get to doing bigger jobs, is to learn when to not talk, and when to, and then when also to quietly say things that are, kind of low key, just, might want to think about this, and try to do as much sidebar with your client. Your job is to make whoever's above you in the food chain look good, period. Like when you're making them look bad, they're not going to hire you again. And I made the mistake one time I was doing a presentation for a general. But I didn't realize the person I needed to impress was his contractor, not him. He was just in the room. And I just ran the contractor over, like literally just thumped him. And so he didn't get the job, and then I didn't get the job, and then the general still didn't have the edit machines that he needed. Go ahead, Bill.
Yeah, that's one of the most subtle parts of this whole topic that I found difficult over the course of all the years I've been doing this, is just understanding who has the juice, who's where. I've had circumstances where I thought I was talking to a primary or principal and dealing with them on something, and it turns out I was dealing with somebody either a level above or below them, and I just didn't understand the org chart. I've left people out of conversations that I should have been addressing, and and this isn't on the crew level, because you shouldn't be talking to most anybody, but I'm just saying, as you get into the production arts, it makes sense to try to whisper to your friends, like, who are these people? If you have crew friends, do you know,
well, and
who
the
is
thing
it
that
to stay out of their way?
The thing that I constantly think about, oftentimes, there's a handful of producers that I work with that run trucks and so on and so forth, and they're just smooth operators all the time. No matter what's happening, they're just handling it. And I think about when you load into the Ritz Hotel. So if you go through the loading dock on the Ritz Hotel, just as you go where the sign-in is, security sign-in, where every Ritz has the same security sign-in, there's a plaque that says, "Ladies and gentlemen, serving ladies and gentlemen." And it's such a thing that's on every Ritz when you walk in. You see it on every one of them as you load in. I never get to stay at the Ritz, but I get to work in them, right? And so, but it always says that, and it's reminding the staff. And if you watch the staff, they're like that. They present themselves as ladies and gentlemen, and they treat everyone around them as ladies and gentlemen. And they don't have a separation or making any decision about it. And the closer you can get to that on a set, the smoother it goes for everyone. It's really easy to devolve, especially when there's a crew member that's trash talking the client, trash talking the union, trash talking, other operators. It's really easy to fall into saying things with them, and all kinds of trouble. You just want to, and you don't need to call them out on it. You just don't need to respond, and you can always tell a really good crew and someone who does that, because the whole crew they'll just look like they're working. They'll just be looking down like they're working. They're not looking at it. Go ahead, Bill, and then Jason.
Well, and also whatever level you're working at, never dismiss I would call them lower level workers. They shouldn't be, but the admins, the receptionist at the beginning, I have gotten tips from a front desk person who I had established a relationship with, just being nice to them, just, you know, asking about their family if you know it. I mean, this is the person at the front desk, and I'm going to see a senior manager. And by getting to know them, I've come in days when he or she has gone, you know, it's a tough day. Bob's really upset about these things, so walk gently. And that is such valuable intelligence that you can get by just being a good human being to everybody, no matter what level there are. Plus, she may be really smart, and she may end up as a senior vice president in 5 years, and you're still working there. And she'll remember how you treated her when she was sitting behind the desk answering the phone.
Yeah. Jason and then Stuart.
One of the most robust findings, especially in organizational psychology, is that bad is always stronger than good, which means, you know, that old saying, one bad apple can spoil the bunch. That is fundamentally and absolutely true. And any good leader will seek that out and immediately get rid of it.
Yeah. I mean, I always, when I try to tell people about that, I take an eyedropper with, you know, a little bit of wine or a color, you know, dye a color when I do it in my class. I have a big glass of water and I just drop one drop into it and just watch how the color changes. And I'm like, that's one bad apple. You know, like that's how, you know, like, you know, and so you just, and just so you know, good producers are going to clear people out. Like, and they have the advantage that you're not on staff. That's one of the big, we were talking, someone was asking about this earlier. You're not on staff. They don't need to call you again. You know, they don't owe you anything. And so as a result, they can just not call again, you know, and so you just have to always know that you're as good as your last job. Stuart?
To follow on with what Bill was just saying, secretaries, security guards, and cleaners all know three things: who's been mistreating the staff, where the bodies are buried, and where the fresh toilet paper is when you need it.
Don't forget,
always be nice to them.
Back and securely.
Yeah. So let's go to the next question here. So we've got Doug asked, how do you get experience on equipment when you really the only way to do it, is actually doing it. That is where, how I do it is I find low paying jobs, or I volunteer, or I make a lot of friends, in those areas. So, I mean, that's what I've done, my pattern. And again, a lot of people have this whole thing about you should be paid for everything you do and everything else. My pattern in life in general has been, if I get something that's paying my bills and I look at where I want to go and I do that for free until I figure out how to make money with it. I'll figure it out. How does it become useful so that someone wants to pay you for it? But you just do it because that's what you want to, that's where you want to go. And I've said it on Twitter, I think, and I've said it here probably a couple of times that, free is the straw that drank 1,000 milkshakes. So while other people are waiting to get hired for it, I will do it. And I will have had that milkshake a long time ago, and then I'll have a bunch of other ones and I'll be charging for it, and I'll build a whole business around it while they're still trying to figure out how to turn it on, and I know that's a very, sacrilegious thing to say as an operator, and I don't do it forever that way. Once I get good at it, then it costs money to do it that way. And, but I don't just have it like, if I'm not busy and I'm going after something, I volunteer my equipment, I volunteer my time, because I want to do reps. The big thing is I just want to do reps all the time, because every show I want to do it. Now, you have to be careful about volunteering. The thing you always have to remember about volunteering, especially for a nonprofit, is they don't respect time. So nonprofits don't respect labor because they don't have to pay for it. So they have lots of volunteers and they just throw people at it. And so you just know that if you're not careful about how you set up your relationship with a nonprofit, they'll grind you into the ground. They'll just grind you up and spit you out, and it's not because they're not good people. It's just because they don't understand that. They don't understand that there's actually time involved, and there's a limited amount that can be done. Jason, and then Stuart and Garrick.
A really easy way to get good on equipment. It is surprisingly cheap to rent a $20,000 camera for 2 weeks. If you really want to get good on it, rent it, use it, do something awesome with it, and then return it.
The faster you can get on a team, the better. The thing is,
Sure.
is that because you learn from teams, we're learning from each other in this little thing. We learn from each other all the time, but you want to work on a team because you're going to learn a lot faster than trying to learn anything on your own. The bigger the crew is, the faster you learn. So I once did one for the NFL where I think the show ended up costing me $1,300 to work on an NFL game. But I learned a lot. I flew to the city. I ran, all I did is run memory cards, for nothing a day, and I mean, I got paid for it, but it didn't cover the cost of the hotel and the flight and everything else. They didn't pay for that because I was supposed to be local. I just took advantage of the opportunity. But I learned so much, in that area, and I had the time, and so you want to, find ways that you can, even if you're taking it at a loss, if it makes sense. It's the cheapest school you can get. Stuart and then Garrick.
Firstly, thank you, Jason, for stealing half of my answer. But the other half is don't be afraid to do something for yourself. Like if you want to learn how to use a piece of equipment, hire it, yep. But put together something like a short film for My Road Reel or 48-hour film, a little project you can do with your friends in effectively a safe environment that you can play with the toys and learn how they work. One other little, I'll call it a trick or a piece of advice, find the manuals for the gear. A lot of the manufacturers have PDF files, user manuals, download them before you go out on a gig, read them. Just spend the time doing the reading. Then if something happens or you need to adjust something, it's fresh in your mind where to make the adjustments on the gear.
And the other thing is that anyone that works with me will tell you that I am a fiend on Google. Like I sit there and I get into a project and I just start Googling everything in little bits, and I watch little movies and I watch little whatever, and I'll find things really quick. I don't work very hard. I don't work for very long without trying to get referenced. I don't try to figure things out. I try to figure out what other people have figured out, and then I try to apply it to what I'm doing. And then, having a part of what the idea of this group is that you're able every day to come back and ask questions about something you're trying to figure out, that you're stumped on. But getting into real work as fast as possible is the key. Go ahead, Garrick.
Is my microphone working all right? I had some trouble earlier.
Yep.
Okay, good. So I work at a church, and lots of churches have lots of great gear. We have some pretty decent gear, and happy to have volunteers come in and learn and grow into using that gear. And promise, I personally won't burn you out, but I work very hard not to burn out volunteers. But look for a church maybe around your area that is looking for volunteers, and they probably have some really great gear. I've seen some churches that have some phenomenal gear setups that you can learn on.
A lot of churches are larger, especially larger churches, are pretty well equipped. I walked into one I don't know, a couple years ago, like a couple CL5s and big cameras and jibs and everything else is all there. Yeah, absolutely. Go ahead, Mickey.
Yeah, one thing I would say is like don't hesitate to step into what you may consider like a lower position that you're used to. Like if it gives you the opportunity to learn from higher end engineers or personnel or on higher end equipment. Like say for example, a lot of productions come through here, and normally like I would go out as the lead, as the mixer. I don't mind being the utility, the guy running cables, the guy soldering, repairing cables, if it would allow me to learn how other people do things.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead, Jason.
Yeah, +1 on what Mickey said. When you're learning, nothing is below you. I'll say that again. Nothing is below you. That is so critical. Just show up and learn.
Sky asks, I'm taking a class to help me build into a business, just a one-man freelancer. My homework is 3 words: vision, strategy, tactics. Where do these fit in the group?
Well, it's actually how to not be just a one-man freelancer.
How to be got it. Sorry. I misread that.
No, I mistyped it.
Oh, okay.
So, okay.
Bad. How to not be.
I've been a freelancer for 20 years because that's what you do in LA. There's work to be had. You find a team, you find a crew, you find, productions come and go. So now up in the Seattle area, everything's very corporate. And so I'm trying to build a team and be relevant.
Yep.
And sustainable.
Yep. Bill.
The best, this has to do with leadership, because as soon as you get more than yourself doing there, you're dealing with working either with smaller crews than bigger crews, and then maybe your vision is that you want to run a company or whatever. It's all about leadership. And the best definition I ever heard of that was leadership is achieving results through the efforts of others. So all these things that we've been talking about is about how to create a system where, you know, yes, you are in charge, quote, but people think that just means you have power. They don't understand that the responsibility for those results at the bottom line is really the weight of this. Because if you're the leader, everything that goes wrong is also falling on your shoulders, the same way that you hope when everything goes right, you get paid wonderfully for achieving those good results. It's a very difficult thing to do. And so for me personally, it's been a challenge in my life deciding, where am I comfort? You know, do I really want to run a big thing? Because that means big responsibility every day. And you have to have the personality to enjoy that and want to bring in more responsibility and be the guy who, or the man or woman who drives those results at the bottom line. And it can be really difficult.
Well,
I think CEOs who have,
I think,
you know,
and that's why the three words are vision, strategy, and tactics. And again, I used to buy my way in because I had the equipment and I knew how to drive a very strategic or specific equipment. But now the equipment's ubiquitous and everybody has a pencil, so to speak. So everybody's a Shakespeare.
Yeah, but those are things I believe that are determined by leadership. And every organization, the leadership is going to set the vision, and the vision is going to inform the strategy of how you're going to execute.
From a kind of a guerrilla warfare version of this, which is the, you know, I have to start from, you know, I don't have any infrastructure. The first thing is that you have to have a good, the freelancing a lot and getting to know, you have to have a good network. I mean, you can't do these shows. You can't do anything without a good network. So you have to have people, because eventually you're going to have to go to a client and say, I represent a group of people that will execute this for you. You know, that's what you're turning it. When you're moving past being a one-man band or one-woman band, you are saying, I can get this done. You don't need to worry about all the people that you would have to hire to get this done. I know the people, and I have a plan and a strategy to get that done. And it's not going to, and you know, the shows that I'm working on right now, I can't do by myself. You know, like I don't have the skill set, and I don't have the number of hours in the day to do it, you know? And so you lean on lots of people but you have to know who to lean on. And again, one of the many things that was going through my head, and the reason that I built the Pixel Core in the first place was, so when I built the Pixel Core, it was very specific. There's going to be a strong demand in media production, and there's not enough people to do it. And we're going to teach everybody how to do it the same way. That was like you know, and that was 20 years ago, or, you know, and this is a slightly different take on that. But the idea is that I knew when COVID hit that the kind of production that was needed, there's not enough people. There's no one that knows how to do it. I know how to do that, but I know that I'm going to need a lot of people, you know, and I need people all over the world, and I need to find the right people. And so part of doing this was, I love talking about tech and I love talking about production. Another part of it was I need to understand Zoom better. And another part was I need to organize people all over the world so that when I start taking on these bigger jobs, eventually people are going to start scaling what they expect from virtual events. And I need more people, and so I need to build a big network, you know, that I can lean on so that I can effortlessly add people to my shows to do that. And it's not about me. It's about building an infrastructure where we can all do that. We can all hire each other. We can all, you know, it's not about me building something around my needs. I just happen to know, I know how to use the architecture really well. But anybody can do it. And people here already have. I mean, you know, people are hiring each other. They're passing work back and forth. They're, you know, doing that. And, you know, it's a matter of finding, again, what we got back to earlier was finding the right person for that job. You know, and what you're looking for when you start building these, they shouldn't start, you know, I got to a point where we had a team of 150 people every day on the ground that in the end, I'm accountable for. But man, I'm glad I didn't get that first. You know, most of my shops were 5 people, and then 8 people, and then 12 people. And then, you get into those. And the other thing that I'm still getting good at is limiting the number of meetings that I'm in, but also having enough meetings, right? You know, so if you butt all your to-dos up as a leader, the problem you get into is you can't get back to people, and so and then people are spinning their wheels because you're not giving. You just have to realize that your job is about giving people feedback. It's not about doing anything. You only do it because you have to, and you have to, and you want to find. You're always trying to find people that are better than you at whatever you're hiring them for. Like that's the goal all the time, that they're better at that than you are, and you keep on surrounding yourself with them. But then you have to give them feedback all the time. You're feeding them all the time, or they'll start going off in some other direction. And the best freelancers, to get back to what we're talking about, the best freelancers are the ones that do more than what you expected, not less. They take your direction and then they make it better than you expect. Like when I get something back from a freelancer that is not what I asked for, but better than what I asked for. If I get less, or if I asked for something and I didn't get it, and I go, okay, well, and it's not the end. It's just me looking at how can I communicate better. But the ones that I will call every single day are the ones that I handed them something and they did it exactly the way I asked for it, but then they added all these little tweaks to it, things I didn't think about. And when you hire people like that can extend your capabilities that way, and they're not just your hands, but they're a whole nother thing that's thinking on that. That's as you're building teams, that's what you're looking for all the time. So as a freelancer, you want to think about that. There is though adding too much. So you have to be very careful of, you're adding in the gap between what was asked for and what is possible, but you're not adding way over here. You're just a little bit more organization, a little taking that stress away from your producer is the thing. And then adding to what they're doing is why they come back over and over again. Go ahead, Stephen.
I mean, you have the person whose job is the cable wrangler. Some people do the cables, put it in. You have the guy that has the rag and he cleans the cable. They'll do a little bit more, and it's noticed.
But as long as that person does get as long as they get it done on time and they didn't cost me more to do that, like that's the thing you have to get to, is you're adding things to it, but it doesn't, you have to make sure that it doesn't show up as to producers as I paid for that, like that, because it can very quickly be that person cleaned all those cables, but I didn't ask them to do that. And now I paid for an extra hour of their time for them to do something. So if you're doing it the same speed and you're doing it, you're absolutely right. They'll be like, oh my gosh, that person, I got to bring that person back. If you're taking an extra hour or two to do it because you're doing something I didn't ask you for, then as a producer, you're like,
bye-bye.
And attention to detail. I think I mentioned this before. I had to submit a wiring diagram to a company. They knew they hired the right person when they saw it, because I pay attention to all the spaces between the wires. They drives me crazy. So, but all of, I tried to make my wiring diagrams as close to a piece of art as I can. I love looking at them, and I try to make them look pretty, and I don't like things going over. I'm very neurotic about white space. And so, I tend to be good at wiring diagrams that look pretty. I don't, Kevin does more useful ones. Henry Ramos said, at what point do you tell a client they're better off somewhere else? Never burn a bridge. This is, and I would say a producer. If you're a freelancer, generally what I would say as a producer is just tell them you're already booked. Like your opinion doesn't really matter. They don't care. They're calling you to find out if you're available. If you're not available, if you don't want to be available to them, you don't want to tell them, I don't want to work with you anymore. Or you don't tell them, I have some personal thing that I have to do. That doesn't mean anything to them. Just say I'm already booked. Like, I don't, like, that just goes, oh, they're busy. And that's a good impression for the producer. You telling them that their job isn't as important as your personal thing, or that you don't like them or whatever. All of that stuff is stuff that is superfluous to the producer, and it'll hurt your ability they won't call you back. Unless you're really, really good. You give them a personal reason that you're not available and they won't call you back. Bill and then Jason.
Yeah, amplifying that, I always have a few people that are, I hope, as good as I am, and then I remember the people who are not. So depending on who calls me, if it's a grinder and I know they're just a pain in the tuchus to deal with, I'll say, I'm not available, but here's a couple of names. I'll give names at the bottom of the list. Well, and if they're really good, I'll give them names off the top of the list. Well,
be careful. Like, one thing I'm really careful about is if people ask me for recommendation, I will only recommend people that I think will represent me well. So I won't, if I don't have someone that the client said, oh, that person was amazing. If I don't think that's going to happen, I won't recommend them. Like, I'd rather just say, I don't know anybody, because I don't want to, because it's now me.
People are just simply not available.
Yeah.
Go
Always
ahead, give yourself the out.
I found that if you simply, at least if this is a client you don't know anything about, just spend a little bit of time on the phone and just say, I want to be sure that, that we're a good fit for each other, and that, what I do is worth my time and your money, and just listen. That's it.
I kind of have a math in my head of also when I bid things out, how much it needs to pay, for that. But there's some things again that I'm really excited about that I'll work on for nothing, or for less. And then there's things that are just, work, and I just have to, and then there's things that are really a pain in the neck and I'll charge a lot for because I just know it'll be painful, and some people will pay you for that. And then you just know that it's going to be painful. But my day rates are pretty flat. Stuart said, what accounting package is simplest for artistically and technically minded folks to use to get their books in order? Go ahead, Jason.
I use an application called Billings from a Canadian company called Market Circle. As far as I can tell, they're the only invoicing only application that hasn't been swallowed up by QuickBooks.
Right. Yeah, QuickBooks is kind of the thing here. Jeff Widgren said, when I own the project, my hourly rate is 100% of my hourly rate. What is the standard or expected rate discount when billing by the hour to another producer that I'm working on for their project? It just depends on how you
Shouldn't
negotiate
be discounting at all.
It just depends on how you negotiate the rate. There's some producers that will give you the rate. They'll just say, we're paying $700 a day for this, or $300 a day for this, or whatever that number is. And then there's other producers that will ask you what your rate is. I generally prefer to work for people who ask me what my rate is, so that's a different conversation we can have next week, but it's as a freelancer, you just have to decide again, how busy you are. When you're thinking about discounts, there are times when you can tell some freelancers are, again, you don't want to fill your work up with junk, but you also don't want to sit there and turn down a whole bunch of paying work, even if it's paying a little less, when you could be generating revenue and learning from a crew. Again, working on a show for a lot less money sometimes means you want to look at what the whole show is. Working on a film, for instance, might pay you a lot less money, but you'll learn a bunch from a film crew. Go ahead, Jeffrey.
Yeah, for me, first of all, it depends on the job, but then I have two rates. I don't have a single hourly rate. I have a half day rate and a whole day rate. And then I'll have a weekly rate if there needs to be a little bit of discount in that.
I try to get to project rates as fast as I can. So what I really want from people, and what I, as a producer, and then what I also generally want to give people is, I think this is what it's going to take. Here's how much I'm going to charge. If we get way outside of that, then we'll talk about what that, what adjustments need to be made. But I want to have people think. I also don't like clients thinking about that they're paying me per hour to have conversations with me about things. Like, I don't want them to feel like I'm calling my lawyer and this is costing me some, you don't want clients to think that this is I have had clients think about that. Like I got a feedback from a client one time because we had 8 people on our show in the call, because it was just an important call. And they were like, well, what's the hourly on everybody? And I was like, that's not your concern. I'm not billing you for the call, because they were just thinking about they're paying $800 an hour or something for that call, and so it, so that you want to I want to get people away from that, so they just feel like they can have a communication with me, and once we're in it, and I try to, again, if we change the spec a lot, then we have to change what that looks like. But I like project rates when I can. Bill, and then Sky.
Yeah, in my experience, some corporate producers are very much spreadsheet oriented. They want a number to go into a box on a quote that's going to fit in. And so they have to have a number. Whenever that's possible to avoid, I agree with Alex, you should avoid it and just try to figure out, here's a number that I think I can do the whole thing with, and unless scope of work changes, I'm comfortable here. But for the freelancer trying to figure out where you're just going to have to, bring up the, what is the rate, and I know what they're trying to do is fill in those boxes and budget.
Yeah, and what I try to do as a freelancer when I'm freelancing is I try to fill as much work with people who don't do that. And so it's, and I'll take the work and I figure out how to fit it in. You have a way that you do it for everybody that wants to. If someone wants me to charge them for every cable, I'll send them 3 pages of cables for $3 a day or whatever. But if I know that that's silly, and then again, if you do many of the things that we were talking about here, you do great work. you do it really well, and you're a good part of a team, over time, you will be very busy all the time. You know, like it's just because there's just not that many people that do that well. You know, like you don't have a lot of competition. If you're doing really high quality work and you're really good and you're really, really good on a team and you're part of that team and, you know, you're low impact on the producer and, you know, high output, you get busy because people just want to keep coming back to you because they don't see that very often. It's hard to build teams like that. As a producer, I can tell you it's hard to build teams like that. You just want to have the producer view you as few number of idiosyncrasies as possible. Everybody's got idiosyncrasies, but most of my teams have very few. You know, like, oh, they're weird, little weird that way, but they're really good at the thing that they do. You want to not have that in their head. You want to just have it like, wow, they're just machines. And they just get this thing done and they knock it out of the park and they do whatever needs to get done. And I can lean on them and everything else. And that's how you stay busy. Bill.
Yeah, here's one little tip. This I determined way too late in my career. I should have done it way earlier. On the grid, when they absolutely want grid box numbers so that their accountants can look at every line, the very first thing I put at the top was the producer's fee, and I would talk to them at a first meeting and say, that's what you're paying me to make your video. And I never had, in all the years I was working, one person try to talk me down from my producer's fee. Never once. They dealt in the details of the spreadsheet and they would try to figure out days or cameras or operators or whatever to get their numbers down. I don't know why. It was psychological. It was like they were telling me you're not worth that, and none of them were willing to do that. So I try to come up with a fair number, but I also was able to increase it over the time as I got more experience, and that top line number really helped me grow my business.
Robert Laney asks, I'm an executive and creative producer. So if you have any questions about how folks like me choose freelance crew and what works well, happy to chime in. Robert, if you're around, go ahead and pop in. We only got a couple more minutes. I'm sorry. I just saw you said that earlier, but we'll have more conversations about this. Sorry, Robert, I didn't see you until right now. I didn't see that question. Greg Yotes said, is there demand for freelance jobs remotely and not on site during the event? Are there valuable tasks that don't require physical presence of the customer at the customer? A lot now. You know, there's a lot of demand for that. I mean, we're doing all of our productions remotely. I mean, even in my building, I don't see anybody. I'm in a room and we see each other in passing, but everybody's in their own rooms. And so I think we're all getting better at it. I think that's going to be a huge opportunity for people as we move forward, is to be able to be a critical part of where we thought you had to be in the room. That's starting to go away. Like we don't feel like you need to be in the room anymore. So it's come a long way. Go ahead, Sky, and then Guy.
I'm going to jump back because I did have the opportunity of interviewing Howard Schultz for just a quick on-camera thing, and their assistant said, you can have the crew that you need, but they have to be in the hallway, because he doesn't want to see just people sitting around. And I'm thinking, well, I only need that person when I need them. But again, that was an attitude from Howard Schultz, the founder of Starbucks. So it was when I started doing production, I very much thought, wow, all these people are sitting around not doing anything and I'm paying them for that. And I was very stingy about that. I wanted to have a crew that was busy all the time. As I started doing bigger jobs, I really want people to be sitting around. so you know, like I try to build a crew. I don't always do this. Like, you know, right now I'm working on some projects where I'm pretty close to 100% capacity, but I try to build crews when I'm doing live events that are running about 40 to 60% capacity. Like I try to run everything. I try to have equipment that is at 40%, 60% capacity. My lenses are zooming from 40 to 60. Like I have this kind of rule of 40 to 60% of what the cap is. And the reason I do that is so that I can flex with the client. You know, I can flex with the job. You know, I can sit there and I can go up, and I'm not adding a bunch of things to do that. I'm just like flexing up and then flexing back down again. And I'm not, and sometimes it gets to 80%, and sometimes it will get to 110%. But I see a lot of people in live, especially trying to run crews at 80%, 90%, 100% capacity. You just make a lot of mistakes. Like you make, there's a lot of mental errors when people are, when people are pushed at the edge all the time, you know, and they're not able to see things. Now, on the other side of that, this is important, probably the last thing. As a crew member, as a freelancer on a set, you want the producer to think that, especially if they're paying you real money, $400 or more an hour, really, if they're paying you at all,
to be on the set. You want them to think that this day is all about them, you know? And so it is not about you doing client calls, working on the next job, surfing Facebook, looking at Twitter, texting, like all those things. When do not think that the producers don't see that. They won't say it, because why would they pick a fight with you? You know, like there's no reason for them to pick a fight with you on set. It's just going to screw up the energy. But I can tell you every person what their characteristics are related to every person on my crew. I can always tell you how much they text, how much they are offline, how much they're on Facebook, how much, like I walk by, how many times they change their screen when I walk by. I notice all of that. I don't say any of it. You know, like I don't say any of those pieces, but I notice whether they're 100% on or not, you know, on the thing. And then I just make decisions. And it doesn't mean that I'm never going to call them again. If they're really good, I'll call them back. But the pecking order changes, you know, and those people that you feel like they're constantly thinking about your project, and they're sitting there looking at where's the next thing to fix, and how do I make this a little bit better, and I'm going to reorganize a couple things here, and I'm going to tighten this here, and you know they're constantly working on their space, and they've figured out 6 other ways to do that, and they're thinking about the backups and everything else, and they're filling that downtime with preparation. Again, those are gold freelancers. You know, like those are the ones that, and again, you don't have to be gold to get work, but it makes it a lot easier. You know, like it just becomes automatic, you know, and those people are hard to get because they're booked out. My brother is like that. My brother is the nth degree of that, right? When he's on set, he's just completely 100% into the show. He's a DP and a Steadicam operator, and all he thinks about is that show. Yeah, he's booked out like 6 months in advance. like it's like, you know, at a good rate. Like you can't, it's really hard to get. I can't hire my own brother to do work for me because, you know, I booked him out for December. I have a shoot in December. I booked him out quickly. I was like, oh, as soon as I had it, I called him. I was like, are you available? Like I need to have, you know, and you know, with editors, same thing. You book them way out in advance because you just want to lock them up, you know, because, you know, it just makes your job as a producer so much easier. And I have to leave here in a second because I have a job to go to. Stuart and then Jeffrey, really fast, like 10 seconds.
Real quick one. For people who are using their phones when they shouldn't be, we have a simple rule on all of our films. If your phone rings during a take and the audio gear or audio recorder hears it, you owe the crew and cast a slab at the after party.
There you go. Yeah.
It's funny how quickly phones get turned off.
Simple as that.
Yeah. The big thing for me isn't the phone call going off. It's people texting during between takes and everything else and not being 100% on. It makes me crazy as a producer, just because you're just trying to get so much done. Everything's moving, and then you got people thinking about 6 other things. And I try to be focused as much as I can. Like I try to be on set, not thinking about anything other than what I'm working on. And people will tell you it drives people in the company crazy because I won't return emails or texts or anything. I won't look down. Like I just literally stay in, because I want to stay in that mental space the whole time. Like when I'm in a production, I actually find it very relaxing when I can have the whole world just sit outside of me. And to me, it's a gift to have a day that I'm just in production and there's nothing else I can do other than pay attention to this. And I don't have to worry about all the other things. They'll all sort themselves out tomorrow. It's an amazing experience that I think a lot of people lose by filling it up with a bunch of distractions. Go ahead, Jeffrey, real quick.
And I'll go back to my union days. I had an awesome project manager that came to me on the first day and he said, come over here, walked over. There was a loop of cable. And he said, if all of your other tasks are done and I can see that they're absolutely done, I should see you over here unwinding and rewinding that cable. That is your last task. And if I see you there, I know that your stuff is done. And if I see it's done, I know you're doing the job I've asked you to do.
Yep. All right, I'm gonna go do my thing. Thanks, everybody. It was great. Was that useful? Is this a useful conversation to have every once in a while? Talk about the kind of the wider picture of these things. Okay, great. All right. Well, we'll talk about the producer side of it, not from the client side or the freelancer side, but how the producer handles the crew next Friday. So stay tuned for that. All right, everybody. Have a great day, and I'll see you tomorrow.